The night before the wedding, my mistress sent me to the young master's chambers to serve as his trial marriage maid. True to his fierce reputation, the young master nearly cost me half my life. After the wedding, the young master and his bride harmonized like music, deeply in love. Out of pity for his bride's delicate health, every night he would first drag me to the side chamber to vent his desires, then return to her room and tenderly hold her as she slept. The young master detested me to the core. Whenever we lay together, he would curse me as seductive and vile, saying I wasn't even half the woman his wife was. If it weren't for his concern for his bride, he would never touch me. And so it went. The young master and his mistress lived in love their whole lives, while I served as a warming bed maid for all my days. 30 years, 10,950 nights, not a single one missed. On my deathbed, the young master held his bride's hand tenderly, stood before my bed, and whispered with a sigh, "From now on, we will truly be a couple for life, just the two of us. Promise me you won't push me away again." "All right." The mistress wept as she nestled in his arms, grief nearly overwhelming her. "Chuanxing, if only I hadn't chosen you as my concubine back then. You stole the husband who was meant to be mine alone." When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day the young lady was selecting a trial marriage maid for the master. I knelt on the ground and said to the young lady, "I already have someone in my heart." I begged the young lady to grant my wish. Hearing my words, her eyes reddened. She took my hand. Sorrowfully, she asked me, "Chuanxing, won't you stay by my side in the future?" I moved my fingers, still held in her grasp, and silently lowered my head. The young lady was the pampered youngest legitimate daughter of the minister. She was kind and delicate, a fragile flower that always needed care. Old Madame Su said I had entered the household at the age of 3, a helpless baby who knew nothing. The family hadn't intended to keep me, but the young lady took pity on me and begged the mistress to buy me into the house. The young lady gave me a way to live. I had to always remember that debt of gratitude. And so, I remembered that kindness for my entire life. To protect the young lady, I began learning martial arts from the household's martial arts master since I was a child. When I was older, I was assigned to serve the miss as her personal maid, becoming her chief lady's maid. Anyone who disrespected the miss, I would beat on sight. Even if noble ladies or madams mocked the miss at banquets, I'd still beat them without hesitation, regardless of whether the master or madam scolded the miss. I would feel discontent and talk back, all because of this unpleasing nature of mine. I was often beaten and scolded by the master and madam. The miss always, with red-rimmed eyes, tenderly applied medicine for me. Everyone in the household said the miss had a bodhisattva-like temperament, yet she had a maid like me, so fiery and relentless. It was simply heaven's injustice. In my past life, fearing the miss would be bullied by her husband's family and concubines after marriage, I agreed to be the trial bride. By day, I served the miss, talked back to her meddlesome mother-in-law, beat and cursed the disrespectful servants, and sold off the maids who flirted with her husband. By night, I became a nameless warming maid, relieving the young master's urges to prevent other maids from stealing the miss's favor. As I wished, the miss was cherished by the young master all her life, bearing him a son and a daughter. Everything was going smoothly, yet on her deathbed, the young mistress looked at me with reddened eyes and said, "Chuanxing, if only I hadn't chosen you as my trial marriage maid back then. You took away the husband who was meant to be mine alone. Young mistress, as you wish. In this life, I will no longer be your trial marriage maid. I repaid your kindness in the last life. In this life, I want to live for myself." I looked up at her and earnestly advised, "Young mistress, the master is deeply devoted to you. For years, he has never taken a chambermaid. He wants to be with you alone for a lifetime. You should trust him." The custom of trial marriage maids exists in the capital. It is practiced by noble families who dote on their daughters, afraid that their girls might suffer a lonely, miserable marriage. But if you insisted, the master and madam, who love you dearly, would surely be able to remove this custom. Moreover, in the last life, after the trial marriage, the master was unwilling to touch me again. It was you, young mistress, who tearfully begged him, saying you couldn't bear to see him suppress himself so, and you also couldn't bear to let me, having only spent one night with him, end up without a man and live a lonely, helpless life. The young master took pity on her kind heart and only relented to let me go to the side chamber. If I had never interfered in this life, the two of them would have gotten what they wished, with only each other by their side. But after hearing my words, the young lady said nothing, only lowering her head and sobbing incessantly. Her slender, frail frame trembled, looking pitiful and helpless. The next day, I heard the madam ask the young lady if she had chosen the trial marriage maid. The young lady, her eyes red, hesitated for a long time without speaking. The madam sighed. Mother knows you share a deep bond with Xiechingya, but if there is no trial marriage and something goes wrong later, it might bring you suffering. The young lady lowered her head and finally spoke softly. Daughter wants Chuanxing to go. The madam pondered for a while before saying, that works. Although that girl is a bit too eye-catching, her loyalty to you is her greatest strength. In the future, she may help you win over your husband. Standing outside the door, I suddenly felt the summer wind was biting cold, chilling me to the bone. After eating lunch, I went to the rockery in the back garden. I ran into Wenzishu as he was returning from the academy. He was walking quickly, a bit rushed from the journey, with a hint of sweat on his forehead. When he saw me standing at the door, his eyes brightened slightly. He took 2 steps forward and bowed to me with clasped hands, saying, Miss Chuanxing, in my past life. When Zishu had heard that I was to become the trial bride for our young lady, he had rushed back just as hurriedly then, asking if I would marry him. In this life, I took the initiative and asked him, When Zishu, do you want to marry me? His handsome face turned a comical shade of red. He looked at me flustered and stammered, Sage Chuanxing, my parents passed away early. My family is poor. I felt like teasing him, so I said, You don't want to marry me? Then I'll ask someone else. When Zishu stepped forward and said urgently, It's not that I don't want to. If Miss Chuanxing doesn't mind my poverty, I will definitely not let you down. I will earn an official title and ensure you live a life of wealth and comfort in the future. I believed his words, because in this year's imperial examinations, he came out first as the top scholar and later won the emperor's favor, becoming a close minister of the Son of Heaven. In my past life, by the time I died, he had already entered the cabinet. When people mention Master Wen, they all sighed with regret, for he never married in his lifetime. In the 10th year of my being the master's warming maid, outsiders only marveled at how devoted the young lady and the master were to each other, knowing nothing of a warming bed maid like me. When Zishu came to me and said that none of the noble ladies in the capital looked favorably upon his background, so he asked if I would be willing to marry him. He vowed he would strive hard to earn me a noble title. But I was too busy back then, busy helping the young lady educate her children, busy helping her deal with the maids who tried to climb into the master's bed. The young lady was too soft-hearted. She couldn't bear to be harsh with her children and always said that those maids were unfortunate, acting against their will. If I didn't help her, the young miss and the young master would have been spoiled into a simpleton and a wastrel, and those maids might have entered the master's back courtyard, becoming concubines and making her life miserable. If I married him, who would help the young lady then? In my past life, did I love Wenzishu? I'm not sure. I only remember that at that time, nothing in my heart was more important than the young lady's kindness to me. So I turned him down again, and now I'm not sure anymore. I just feel that marrying him would make me happy. I said to Wenzishu, As long as the master agrees, I'll marry you. Then I walked forward. After a few steps, I paused instinctively and looked back at Wenzishu. He was scratching his head and grinning, a silly smile that made me curl my lips too. Wenzishu was the nephew of Aunt Wen, the master's favorite concubine in the mansion. He had lost both parents at a young age. With Aunt Wen unable to support him any longer, she entered the mansion as the master's concubine. When they first arrived, Aunt Wen wasn't favored, and he, as her little baggage, lived a hard life. He never knew what his next meal would come, always starving and gaunt, bullied by the maids and servants. Back then, I was already the insolent head maid by the young lady's side. I couldn't stand anyone being more arrogant and bullying than me, so I scolded and beat those maids and servants who tormented him. I gave him a steamed bun, and with my protection, when Zishu's life became much easier. Until later, when concubine gained favor, and Wen Zishu became a young master who couldn't be slighted in the mansion. Not long after, he went to study at the best academy in the capital, and I saw less of him. But on his days off, he would always bring me some novel snacks from outside and leave them in the rockery of the back garden, the place where I first met him. With concubine when so favored by the master, as long as she spoke up, I should no longer have to serve as the trial marriage maid for the young lady. When I returned to the young lady's courtyard, I saw that Master Xiechingye had arrived and was standing under the peach blossom tree. He spoke softly to the young lady, she shy and bashful, he affectionate, just like in the previous life. Loving without suspicion. I stood properly to the side and did not speak. The young master seemed to notice the movement and looked over at me at the same time. He was slightly startled, his gaze toward me a bit complicated. As he looked at me absent-mindedly, the young lady accidentally knocked over the teacup, her expression unable to hide her disappointment. I stepped forward to clean up and tactfully retreated to stand in the distance again, head bowed. Half a quarter hour later, Xiechingye was ready to leave. The young mistress glanced at me, her eyes slightly misty. She bit her lip and turned away, instructing me to see the young master out. I lowered my head, obediently assenting. When I saw Xiechingye to the gate, he suddenly stopped, fixing me with a cold stare. You're dressed so coquettishly today. Deliberately trying to seduce me, aren't you? Huh. You're still as bewitching and vile as ever. Your mistress may be kind-hearted, but I won't indulge you. Once you enter the household, you'd better behave yourself, or I will make sure you regret it. Xiechingye looked at me with contempt and disgust, exactly as he did in my past life. I suddenly remembered that every time in bed, he would also say with disgust that I was seductive and vile, like a brothel prostitute. I used every trick to hold on to him. At first, I wasn't like that. It was because during that time, someone had given Xiechingye a courtesan from Yangzhou. Every smile and frown of that courtesan was alluring. The young mistress was afraid that Xiechingye would waver. I cried in my room all afternoon. That evening, Nurse Su gave me a booklet and told me to study it, saying that if I mastered it, the young master would not be lured away by outsiders, and my young lady would no longer be sad. I learned it very well, surpassing even the famed courtesans of Yangzhou. Even Xiechingye took me to the side chamber for longer than usual. Nurse Su was both satisfied and dissatisfied, scolding me for days on end. Even my young lady's smile carried a hint of strain. It wasn't until later, when I became better at the arts of the bedchamber and could make Xiechingye leave earlier, that life finally returned to calm. But in this life, I won't curry favor with him for my young lady's sake. These clothes are meant for visiting Wen Zishu. I looked at Xiechingye and suddenly realized that in my past life at this very time, he was clearly not like this. Could it be that he also has memories from the future? My heart tightened. Then I lifted my head and looked at him seriously. This servant has no feelings for the young master, and I will not enter your household as a trial marriage maid. Hearing this, Xiechingye furrowed his brows slightly, then let out another scoff. I forgot. During the day you're quite good at pretending. He didn't deign to look at me, turned and left, clearly not believing me. Watching his back, I couldn't help but recall my past life. In my previous life, I was afraid of making the young lady sad. Except at night when I was on Xiechingye's bed, having no choice but to help the young lady secure favor, during the day I always drew clear boundaries with him, not daring to overstep even a little. Returning to the young lady's courtyard, I found her weeping by the bedside. Nanny Su was soothing her nearby. When she saw me enter, the young lady hastily wiped away her tears, her almond eyes red like walnuts, and forced a smile at me. Chunxing your back. Nanny Su, however, glared at me fiercely, her eyes full of displeasure. I nodded in acknowledgement. The young lady said in a muffled voice, "You may leave now. I'm tired and want to rest alone." After Nanny Su and I went out, her face darkened. She glared at me viciously, raised her hand, and slapped me. "Chunxing, you ungrateful little wench. If it weren't for the miss saving you back then, the grass on your grave would be 2 meters tall now. The young master comes from a distinguished family with outstanding looks and learning. Being able to test the marriage for the miss is your blessing. Do you know how many maids in our household dream of becoming this trial marriage maid? If it weren't for the miss cherishing you, Do you think this good fortune would fall upon you? I covered my face, feeling no emotion at all, and only said calmly, I don't want this blessing, ma'am. Even less do I want to touch the Mrs. Beloved and cause her pain. Aunt Sue was momentarily speechless. Then her tone softened a bit. I misjudged you. You're a girl who knows gratitude. That's precisely why the miss wants you to be this trial marriage maid. If she chose those restless maids who covet the young master and always try to seduce him, wouldn't that break the miss's heart in the future? I remained unmoved and only said softly, the young master is deeply devoted to the miss. If no trial marriage maid were sent, they would surely grow old together. Before I could finish, Aunt Sue scolded and cut me off. Nonsense. If no trial marriage maid is sent. If the master turns out to be no good, the young miss would be doomed to a lifetime of misery after marriage. If you still remember the kindness the young miss has shown you, you should willingly take on the role of the trial marriage maid. I fell silent and did not argue further. I was merely a maid. The decisions made by the madam and the young miss left me with no right to refuse. The days passed uneventfully. It seemed that old Madam Sue had said something to the young miss, for the way she looked at me was always tinged with sorrow. Yet she forced a smile, took my hand, and said that with my beauty, Xie Qingye would surely come to like me. She said that Xie Qingye was a gentle and considerate person. If I stayed with her in the Xie residence for the rest of my life, I would have something to look forward to. Everyone in the household was saying that I was ungrateful. The young miss treated me so well, and yet I had the audacity to covet the master. It was only because she had such a good temper that I wasn't sold off. If I had a different mistress, I would have been long gone. I did not bother to argue. I simply counted the days in my mind. When Zishu said that the master was out of town, and Wen's concubine had already sent a letter, the master agreed. 15 more days. 3 days before the young lady's wedding, he would return. At that time, he would betroth me to him. 10 days later, Xie Qingye came again. The young lady called me into her room and, forcing a smile, said to him, Xie Lang, I intend to have my personal maid, Chuanqing, serve as your trial marriage maid. I clutched my sleeves, hung my head, and remained silent. I could feel Xie Qingye's gaze fall on me, filled with contempt and mockery. Then I heard him speak slowly. Rower, this maid of yours has improper intentions. Just a few days ago, she tried to seduce me. It is truly repulsive. I looked up and met his sneering eyes and also saw, to the side, the complex expression on the young lady's face. Xie Qingye gently held the young lady's hand and said softly, Rower, if I could, I would not want to touch anyone else. I only wish to spend my life with you. But if you insist, I respect your choice. A shy blush gradually spread across the young lady's face. Xie Qingye tenderly pulled her into his arms and spoke softly to her. After about a quarter of an hour, the sky gradually darkened. The young miss bit her lip and again instructed Chuanqing, escort Master Xie out of the mansion. Xie Qingye's cold gaze immediately fell on me. Once out of the young miss's courtyard, he raised his hand and pinched my chin, forcing me to lift my face. Then, with a look of disgust, he said, That face of yours is as bewitching as ever. He gave a light snort, showing disdain. You say you don't want to enter the mansion, but it's just a coy refusal. If it weren't for Rower's sake, I would have punished your seductive self long ago. Having said that, without waiting for my reply, he jerked his hand away from my chin and stormed off with a flick of his sleeve. I stared at his back and thought, in 5 more days, the master will return. When I went back, the young miss was sitting in her room, about to try on the phoenix crown she would wear for the wedding. Perhaps having heard the young master say he had no interest in me, the bitterness in her heart had dissipated, and she seemed in good spirits. When she saw me return, she cheerfully called me over to comb her hair and help her try on the crown. I stood properly beside her and placed the phoenix crown on her head. The phoenix crown was extremely magnificent and priceless, with the largest East pearl set on top. It was the one Xie Qingye had searched for 10 years and was most satisfied with, sent over a year ago. My lady gently stroked that East pearl with one hand while holding mine with the other. She said softly, Chuanqing, so the one your heart belongs to is Brother Xie. You don't need to hide it from me. I treat you like a sister. I'm very happy that you can accompany me to the Xie mansion. I looked up in shock at my lady. Although there was a smile on her face, her eyes held a hint of wariness and reluctance. In my past life, she always smiled like that and held my hand. Unfortunately, I never truly understood it back then. I withdrew my hand from hers and said softly, "Miss, this servant has no feelings for the young master, nor do I wish to marry." But my lady interrupted me. "You're being insincere again. Brother Xie is handsome and from a prestigious family. It's only natural for you to admire him. Even though Brother Xie detests you deeply, with me here, you won't suffer any grievances in the future." Perhaps it was my imagination, but when she mentioned that Xie Qingye disliked me, the young lady's eyes seemed to brighten a little. I lowered my eyes and stopped defending myself. The matter of me seducing the young master, Xie Qingye, spread like wildfire. Soon it had spread throughout the household. Madame Su looked at me with utter disgust and punished me by making me kneel in the woodshed for a whole day and night. She wouldn't let anyone give me food or water. The others called me a disloyal servant who should be sold off. It was only because the young lady was kind-hearted that I wasn't beaten to death. When Zishu also heard about this, he was frantic with worry, but being an outsider, he couldn't enter the inner courtyard. He could only go to Concubine Wen for help. That evening, the senior maid by Concubine Wen's side secretly brought me some food and water. "Miss Chuanqing, the young master's cousin asked me to pass a message to you. In 5 more days, your marriage will be settled. He said that from now on, he will never let you suffer again." Watching her, I smiled. "Please pass a message to him for me as well. Tell him that I believe in him." The young lady was used to having me attend to her. And when the maidservants restrained her, she would get into arguments with others at banquets. She needed me for everything. So the next day, she released me from the woodshed. Old Ma'am Su warned me, "Miss Spring Apricot, the young lady is kind-hearted. Even though you coveted the master's son-in-law, she couldn't bear to punish you. You must remember this debt of gratitude." I hung my head and remained silent. Soon, another 5 days passed. That day was the day the master returned. It was also the day the madam would force me to drink the infertility potion. Early in the morning, the young lady led me to the madam's room. The madam ordered her senior maidservant to bring the infertility potion before me. "Spring Apricot, if you are a loyal maid, drink this bowl of infertility potion." In my previous life, I drank that bowl of infertility potion without any hesitation. But now, I clenched my fingers and instinctively looked at the young lady. The young lady's eyes reddened as she looked at the madam, as if wanting to plead for me. "Mother, Spring Apricot." The madam's expression turned stern. "Roar." The young lady shrank back and did not argue with the madam again. Instead, she looked at me with reddened eyes and whispered comfortingly, "Chuanqing, even if you never have children in the future, since we are sisters, my child will surely support you in your old age." I stared blankly at the mistress. Everyone who had ever met her said she was kind-hearted. She was an exceptionally good person. She always talked about equality for all and never put on airs as a young lady. Even with the lowest-ranking maids in the mansion or beggars on the street, she would speak gently and help whenever she could, without a trace of contempt. In my past life, even the maids I had sold off for seducing the young master never spoke ill of the mistress. They only hated me, a lackey who bullied others by relying on her power. As for the son and daughter the mistress gave birth to, they were full of adoration for their mother. But toward me, the maid who constantly disciplined them, they felt nothing but extreme disgust. In my past life, when I died, they were already adults and happily held a big banquet in the mansion. They celebrated that this wicked servant had finally died and that their mother would never again be soft-hearted and deceived by this wicked servant. Thinking about it, my past life was truly ridiculous. I had earned the disgust of everyone. Snapping back to reality, I knelt heavily and kowtowed to the young lady and madam above me, speaking earnestly. "This servant is unwilling." The young lady and madam seemed not to have heard me clearly. They paused. "What did you say?" The young lady spoke blankly. I said, "This servant is unwilling to drink the fertility-ending decoction." The young lady bit her lip and asked me, "Chuanqing, do you want to bear Xieling's child?" As soon as she finished speaking, the madam beside her angrily threw her teacup and scolded, "You treacherous creature! I originally thought that even though you seduced Xiechingye, at least you were loyal to Rower, so I let it go. I never expected you would harbor such presumptuous thoughts. Guards, drag this ungrateful wretch away. I shook my head, straightened my back, and said loudly, Madam, this servant has no intentions toward the young master, nor have I ever thought of bearing his child. I beg Madam's understanding. The Madam's expression grew even angrier. How dare you? A mere maidservant dares to refuse the orders of the master? Guards, slap her mouth. The maids and matrons rushed toward me. The young lady looked at me helplessly, crying softly as she tried to persuade me. Chuanxing, I know you want to give Xieling a child, and you're saying this out of spite. Quickly apologize to mother, or else I won't be able to protect you. I looked at the young lady and was silent for a long while, until the slap was about to land on my face. The sound of hurried footsteps came from the doorway, along with a mature male voice. Stop. My heart stirred. I turned my head and saw the master striding in, followed by concubine Wen, who looked anxious. The maids and servants paused in their steps. The young lady and the madam looked toward the door. The young lady said softly, Father, you're back. The master nodded affectionately at the young lady, then looked at the madam and said, Choose another maidservant for the trial marriage. I have betrothed Chuanxing to Zishu. I looked at concubine Wen behind the master. She noticed my gaze and nodded at me with a smile. My shoulders, which had been tense all along, suddenly relaxed. For a moment, I felt like crying. So I didn't have to bear it all alone after all. I kowtowed heavily to the master. Thank you, master, for your blessing. The mistress frowned, while the young lady widened her eyes, looking at me in some surprise. After returning, the young lady's expression was extremely complicated. She looked at me as if she wanted to speak but stopped, and after a long while, she finally said, Chuanxing, are you deliberately marrying Wen Zishu out of spite because mother wants to feed you the childlessness potion? In the young lady's eyes, Master Xiechingye was the best, while Wen Zishu was just a poor relative from a concubine's family, not even 1/10 as good as Xiechingye. How could I possibly like Wen Zishu over Xiechingye? She thought for a moment, as if she had made up her mind, and took my hand, whispering to me, Chuanxing, if you marry someone you don't love, you will regret it for the rest of your life. You are not yet married. If you don't want to marry Wen Zishu, I can go and talk to father. If you want to have a child, I can beg mother and my husband to let you keep one. I slowly withdrew my hand from hers and gently shook my head. Miss, the person I once told you about as my true love is Master One. I have never coveted your future husband. The young lady was stunned for a long time. She asked me with some sadness, Chuanxing, you really won't stay with me in the future? I lowered my head and answered properly, Miss, in the future, your husband will accompany you. Because the only auspicious day for marriage in the near future was 3 days later. The day of my marriage to Wen Zishu was set on the same day as the young lady's. The mansion was magnificent, with music playing and guests filling the hall, extremely lively. Meanwhile, in a small courtyard on the outskirts, it was deserted and exceptionally simple. Besides me and Wen Zishu, only Madame Wen and her personal maid were present. Yet my heart was filled with joy. After we performed the wedding ceremony, Madame Wen placed my hand in Wen Zishu's and said with a smile, Chuanxing, I've watched you grow up. I know you're a good girl. For Zishu to marry you is his blessing. May you live well together in the future. That will put my mind at ease. Wen Zishu's hands were large, unlike Xiechingye's smooth and delicate ones. There were slight calluses on his palms, and they felt very unique to the touch. I couldn't help scratching his palm. He tightened his grip on my hand slightly. Through the gap in the red veil, I saw that Wen Zishu's earlobes seemed to have turned bright red. Concubine Wen continued, Zishu, now that you have achieved your wish, you must treat Chuanxing well. If you dare to let her down, I will not forgive you. Wen Zishu said solemnly, Thank you, Aunt, for your blessing. I will surely remember your words today. I also spoke softly, Thank you, Aunt, for your blessing. In the future, I will certainly join my husband in being filial to you. Concubine Wen's voice choked up, you're both good children. After lifting the red veil, Concubine Wen left with the maidservant. Only Wen Zishu and I remained in the room. Wen Zishu opposite me, his earlobes still as red as if they would bleed. His gaze fell on my face, and he smiled foolishly. He still held my hand tightly. I don't know if it was nerves or what, but his palms were sweating, making my hand damp as well. He stared at me without blinking, his tone very serious. Miss Chuanxing, I will work hard. In the future, I will surely let you live in a big house in the capital and become an official's wife. I looked at his sincere gaze. I smiled. Husband, why do you still call me Miss Chuanxing now? When Zishu was startled, I asked him, can you give me a name? I want to share your surname, Wen. Ever since I can remember, I have been in the Tao residence. My name was given to me by the young lady, but I have never really liked the name Chuanxing. Shiji. When Zishu suddenly spoke.
What?
I didn't hear clearly. When Zishu looked into my eyes and said, When Shiji. As the wife of me, When Zishu, I ought to cherish and love you. I looked at Wen Zishu. I had thought that today, on our wedding day, the joy in my heart was already more than enough. In this life and the last combined, I had never felt such joy. But at that moment, hearing his words, the joy in my heart was so full it was about to overflow. Unlike the uncomfortable venting of the young master, when Zishu's actions were gentle, just as he said, I am his wife, he cherishes and loves me. After I left, the young lady still sent someone to test the marriage, but this time she replaced it with another close maid by her side, Chiyua. As for what happened later, I didn't know then. After I married Wen Zishu, life was extremely plain, but that faint joy always lingered in my heart. I had been the senior maid for over 10 years, throwing my weight around by my young lady's side. I could do hair, embroidery, massage, and even fight, but I was not good at cooking. The first time I cooked, I almost set the kitchen on fire. After that, when Zishu did the cooking, he was quite skilled. Even simple porridge and vegetables were flavorful. He copied books and painted to supplement the household income. In my spare time, I also embroidered pouches for him to sell in the city. It wasn't until I found a small box of pouches in his study that I realized he had secretly hidden all my embroidery instead of selling them. He said supporting the family was a man's job. Besides, the pouches I embroidered were only for his own use. At night, I twisted his arm in anger. He laughed and begged for mercy, but still refused to sell my embroidered items. In the blink of an eye, over a month passed, and it was time for Wen Zishu's imperial examination. A sudden, uninvited guest appeared before my small courtyard. Xie Qingye stood at the gate, his face as cold as ice as he gazed at me. Chunxing, I never thought you'd actually married someone. Shiji. I looked at him and said softly. He was startled. What? I said, my name is Wen Shiji. Wen Shiji. Xie Qingye let out a sneer, his expression growing even more mocking. I didn't expect that, coming back a second time. You've grown even more scheming. Your marriage with that Wen Zishu is a sham, isn't it? You deliberately avoided the Xiao estate and put on this whole act of playing hard to get, just so you wouldn't have to be a childless, nameless bed-warming maid anymore. All right, I'll indulge you. I'll grant you the status of a concubine and give you a child. Stop making a fuss. Come back to the estate with me today. If it weren't for Rower's kind heart, unwilling to leave you suffering in this godforsaken place, I wouldn't bother with you at all. I stared fixedly at Xie Qingye. For the first time, I felt that the young lady's taste was truly poor. Xie Qingye was clearly not even a fraction of the man my husband was. Young master, I never wished to enter the Xiao estate. He looked disdainful. Enough. This game of playing hard to get only works once. If you anger me, I'll wash my hands of you for good. In my previous life, I willingly entered the mansion to repay the young lady's life-saving grace. In this life, after repaying that debt, I never intended to enter the mansion again. Master, my entering the Xie mansion was never because of you. Xie Qingye's face immediately turned extremely ugly. He sneered. Chunxing, I told you, the game of playing hard to get only works once. The next moment, from afar came the sound of drums and trumpets, along with someone announcing the good news. Passed.
Passed.
Lady Wen, your husband has placed first in the imperial examinations. I abruptly lifted my head, my face full of joy, and ran forward. Halfway there, I stopped, turning my head to look at Xie Qingye. Master, My husband is handsome and learned, and has placed first in the exams. Tell me, what would I gain by insisting on being your concubine, rather than being the principal wife of a top scholar? After saying this, I no longer looked at Xiechingye's ugly expression and ran forward, just as in my previous life. After Wen Zishu won the top scholar title, it wasn't long before he gained the emperor's favor and became a close minister to the Son of Heaven. He also fulfilled his promise, making me an official's wife and taking me back to live in the capital. The mansion now had maids and nannies, as well as page boys. He never indulged in visiting brothels, nor did he ever look at other women. He only stayed by my side, living a quiet life. He always said with a smile that his family was poor and no one thought highly of him. Fortunately, I didn't mind and was willing to marry him. He was already more than content. If he had any other intentions, even if I didn't say anything, he himself wouldn't tolerate it. Occasionally, we would go to the Tao residence to visit concubine Wen. With a sigh, she told me about Mrs. Matters. Autumn Moon had plain features and a dull personality. She couldn't win over the young master. When Miss was pregnant with her first child, the young master took a concubine. At first, Autumn Moon scolded and beat the concubine on behalf of Miss, but was punished by the young master. Miss also said that the concubine had a miserable background and that Autumn Moon shouldn't bully her. After that, Autumn Moon became like a wooden block, not saying a single bad word about the concubine. As a result, the concubine became even more arrogant. Gradually, she began to bully Miss herself. Not long ago, Miss returned to her parents' home crying, saying she wanted a divorce. The young master came that very day. She coaxed the young lady back with gentle words. The madam arranged for a formidable old woman to accompany the young lady back, instructing the young lady to listen to the old woman. After returning, the old woman, taking advantage of the young master's absence, took it upon herself to sell off the concubine. As it happened, the concubine was also pregnant with the young master's child. The young lady also said that the old woman had gone too far and did not protect her. The young master, even more furious, directly beat the old woman to death. He also came to the mansion to cause a scene with the madam, accusing her of instigating the old woman and causing discord in the Xia household. Later, when the young lady came home crying, the madam no longer offered any advice. I sighed with emotion upon hearing this. I hadn't expected that in this life, without my intervention, the young lady and her husband would no longer be as loving as in the previous life. Truly, how unpredictable life is. Later on, the young lady resented the madam for not caring about her, and gradually she stopped coming back to the mansion. I also rarely heard about the young lady from concubine Wen anymore. Wen Zishu, just like in the previous life, had a smooth official career. Within 10 years, he had reached the 3rd rank. We had a son and a daughter. The eldest son resembled him, and the younger daughter resembled me. He was strict with his eldest son but spoiled his little girl endlessly. If I hadn't kept an eye on her, the little lass would have been turned into a little demon by him. Concubine Wen had no children of her own, so she adored these 2 kids especially. On the 1st and 15th of every month, I would take the children to visit her. The master had feelings for her, but he was 20 years older. My husband and I discussed that once the master passed away, we would bring concubine Wen to our home to spend her old age. 15 years into our marriage, when Zishu entered the cabinet and finally managed to have an honorific title bestowed upon me. At the year-end palace banquet, he took me along. After so many years, I saw Miss again. She looked much thinner, her face drawn and careworn, appearing much older. Compared to her previous life, she was a different person entirely.
Miss also saw me.
She hesitated for a moment, then an endless regret surfaced in her eyes. After the palace banquet ended, Miss stopped me and said softly, "Chuanqing, do you resent me?" I looked at her and said quietly, "I am now called Wen Shiji." Miss suddenly laughed, a bitterly painful laugh. "Chuanqing, I regret it. My son and daughter are both utterly incorrigible now. They never show any understanding for me as their mother. They always complain that I cry all day and have no ability. In Xia's household, there are countless concubines and dozens of legitimate and illegitimate children." As she spoke, she started crying. She looked at me pleadingly. "Chuanqing, can you help me? Now you are the only one who can help me. You shouldn't be like this. You should be with me in the Xie mansion. Will you come back to the Xie mansion with me? I know you like Master Xie. You don't want to be a concubine. I'll have Master Xie marry you as his equal wife. I couldn't listen anymore. I darkened my face and said, Lady Xie, please show some respect. My husband and I are deeply in love. I have never loved anyone else. My husband is now a second-rank official, so I have no interest in being an equal wife. After saying that, I didn't look at her disheartened expression anymore. I turned and left. As I was leaving the palace, I ran into Xie Qingye again. He looked at me from afar and asked absent-mindedly, Chuanqing, if I divorce my wife, would you marry me? His answer was a punch from my husband. That day, Xie Qingye was beaten black and blue by my husband. On the way back, my husband nervously held my hand, his face filled with melancholy. My lady is so beautiful, it always makes my heart uneasy. Shiji, please don't abandon me. I smiled and pinched his arm. Nonsense. You deserve a punishment. After, when Zishu begged for mercy, he gently pulled me into his arms. Shiji, thank you for being willing to marry me. I leaned against his chest and slowly closed my eyes. Zishu, thank you too, for waiting for me so long. The end.